Chair, I unfortunately have another meeting at 6, so I may have to leave the meeting early. So apologies in advance for that.
We will do our best to make sure we've all the business concluded by then, Josephine. I take it that there is no apologies from anybody else. I'm not sure. I haven't been speaking to Alan for a couple of days. He normally tells me when he's not able to attend.
Yeah, nothing has come through Democratic Services.
I'm not aware of any, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. So,
and I don't have any either, Councillor McLaughlin.
Yeah. Okay. So number 2 is declarations of interest. Not seeing anybody indicating, but we know we can come in again. And then the signing, that will happen at some stage. So matters arising then. So page 1. Page 2. Sorry. Yeah.
Chair, just to say, page 2, there were 2 items there just in relation to our planning committee and arrangements around that, but that matter is all resolved now, so we've moved that's moved on significantly since then.
Okay. Page 3. Page 4.
Chair, if I could just come in on page 4, and the same comment applies to the top of page 5. Those letters will our draft will issue following on the basis that they're ratified at council now at the start of December. Those letters will follow an issue after that.
Okay, thank you. And page 6 then is just signing. So the next item, I'm just going to scroll on, is item agenda 6, strategic work plan progress update.
So Chair, I suppose our next item on the agenda there would just be item 5.
Sorry.
Danielle Clark is on the meeting and has joined us and has a presentation to deliver to us. So I don't know, Alan, if you want to do any more detailed introductions than that. I know you've been engaging directly with Danielle ahead of the presentation.
You know, if you're minded, Chair, I'll just say a few words and then I'm happy to hand over to Danielle.
Oh, I'm well and happy, Alan. You work away.
No problem. Thank you, Chair. So if you cast your mind back to 2021 and the establishment of the Rural Affairs Subcommittee, a lot of the evidence that we used to initially establish a subcommittee and to provide us the evidence base from which we worked was sourced from DAERA's Key Rural Issues publication, probably 2020 back then. And obviously there have been sort of at least 4 updates on that since. And we sort of tried to note those through the subcommittee every year as they get updated. So it's fair to say this publication is a key document for the subcommittee. It outlines a whole range of data and a whole range of indicators sourced from both DAERA and across central government, broken out into the sort of the urban-rural classifications that are commonly used in Northern Ireland. What it also does, not to steal too much of Danielle's thunder, but what we've really benefited from is in some indicators, it splits the rural out into 2. So you have urban and then you have rural areas that are within an hour's drive time of Belfast, and then rural areas that are outside an hour's drive time from Belfast. So at the meeting back in May, the Key Rural Issues 2024 publication was an update was provided by officers to members. And I think the recommendation coming out of that meeting was that we'd actually invite a statistician from DAERA to come and discuss it with us, because we'll get more insight from Danielle's knowledge and expertise, both on the publication itself and future plans from the publication. So if you're content and Danielle's content, I'm happy to sit back and listen to and enjoy the presentation. So thank you, Chair. And thank you very much to Danielle for willingly coming along this evening to present this to us.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Okay, Danielle, you're very welcome. And it's over to you. I don't know, are you going to put up a show for us, or are you just going to?
No, I'm going to share some slides here, so hopefully this will work. Can I just, are you seeing the big main slide?
It's just coming up now. There you go. I'm seeing it anyway. I'm not sure if everybody else is, but I'm okay. So
Yes,
That's
we
good.
can see it.
Yeah, we can see it.
Great. I would just like to thank the Rural Sub-Affairs Committee for inviting me to attend today's meeting and the opportunity to present key rural issues and the official statistics report. And I hope that the report is useful to you, with approximately 70% of the population of Fermanagh and Omagh living in rural areas. And I'd be grateful for any feedback on developments you would like to see in the area of rural statistics, or any limitations you experience in their use. So over the course of the next 15 to 20 minutes, I hope to take you through an introduction to the Key Rural Issues report and the background of its development, an overview of the most recent statistics, including the breakdowns by drive time, boundaries and intra-rural differences reported in the data, and in information on access to services in rural areas. And I'll give an overview of current developments in the rural statistics and future plans for rural data and evidence. And we'd welcome any questions or feedback on the report and the associated information. So in terms of an introduction, analytical support for rural data and evidence is provided by Northern Ireland Statistics and Research Agency statisticians working in DAERA's Statistics and Analytical Services branch, and DAERA SASB produce the annual official statistics report, Key Rural Issues. The report was first issued in 2019 to coalesce, contextualise and supplement existing data, largely from across the NISR network, which could be reported on an urban-rural basis. The report sought to provide rural data in a unified, user-friendly and accessible format, and it's a compendium report which provides additional analysis and trend data where available. The most recent publication in 2024 was published in February 2025, and statisticians are currently working on the next iteration, which will be published early in 2026. The report includes urban and rural breakdowns of data across the 9 sectors of education, employment, industry, tourism, connectivity, access to services, health and wellbeing, crime, and household income, housing and poverty. The reporting geographies and key rural issues have been informed by the 2015 review of settlement classifications undertaken by NISR, which recommended a default urban-rural boundary at the population level of 5,000. All settlements with a population of less than 5,000 and areas of open countryside are defined as rural. The classification also incorporated measures of distance to settlements with a population of 10,000 or more, and these measures were intended to be a proxy of accessibility. Within the classification, Belfast is regarded as the main regional economic driver, most important employment centre and focus for administration and commerce in Northern Ireland. In 2020, 36% of the rural population lived more than 60-minute drive from Belfast. And between 2001 and 2020, the population of rural areas grew by 20%, compared to a 7% increase in urban areas. As such, the proportion of the Northern Ireland population living in rural areas rose by 2 percentage points to 36%. The areas with the fastest population growth were mixed urban-rural areas and areas within the 1-hour drive time of Belfast. Key Rural Issues is a compendium report, meaning it draws insights from a wide range of outputs. The report currently includes 21 different data sources from 11 different data providers, which I've listed here. The sources highlighted in blue in this slide indicate data in the key rural issues that's not only reported at the urban-rural level, but is further broken down by rural up to 1 hour from Belfast and rural more than 1 hour from Belfast. In tandem with the annual production of the report, we continue to scope for new data or alternative sources of data and seek more granular reporting of the data where possible. The main aim of the report is to focus rural perspective, highlighting disparities by geography, and in doing so provide a transparent, robust and trustworthy evidence base to inform rural development and support equitable treatment of rural communities in policies and programmes. So I'm now going to move on to the key findings of the most recent report, based largely on 2024 data, or alternatively the data source that was most recent at the time of the publication in February 25. So starting with education, 81% of school leavers in rural area school having achieved 5 or more GCSEs at grades A star to C, compared to 72% of urban school leavers. They're also more likely to head to higher or further education than their urban counterparts. 61% of working age people in rural areas are likely to be in full-time employment and are less likely to be economically inactive than those living in rural areas. Additionally, these workers are more highly skilled and more likely to report high job satisfaction than those in urban areas. In 2024, 58% of Northern Ireland businesses were in rural areas, yet rural businesses accounted for less than a quarter of employees and just over 28% of total business turnover. Rural businesses predominantly engage in agricultural, forestry, fishing and construction, with urban businesses more widely spread across a variety of sectors. In 2021, workers from rural areas had an average commute of almost double that of urban workers, travelling on average more than 600 miles more during the year to get to work, and they're much more likely to use their own transport to commute than urban dwellers are. In 2024, life expectancy is higher in rural areas at 80.3 years for males and 83.7 years for females. However, rural dwellers wait longer for emergency services response than their urban counterparts, with ambulance waiting times continuing to increase for rural areas. Similar proportions of urban and rural households are in relative poverty or absolute poverty. 5 of the top 10 most visited paid attractions in Northern Ireland in 2022 were in rural areas. The Marble Arch Caves was in 7th place with approximately 127,000 visits. In terms of health and well-being, rural dwellers report higher levels of happiness and life satisfaction and lower levels of anxiety than urban dwellers. People from rural areas are less likely to experience burglary, vandalism and violent crime than those in urban areas, and levels of home ownership are higher in rural areas at 83% compared to 67% for urban areas. I know that more granular geographical breakdowns are likely to be of interest to the Rural Affairs Subcommittee, as all residents of Fermanagh and Omagh live outside the 60-minute drive time to Belfast, and as such, the next few slides focus on data that can be reported at this disaggregation. In 2020, 36% of the population lived more than 60 minutes drive from Belfast. In 23-24, the adult populations of rural and urban areas were similar in terms of all education. However, there are differences in qualifications. In 23-24, rural dwellers who live more than an hour's drive from Belfast were slightly less likely to have achieved degrees or degree level or higher qualifications than their urban counterparts and their rural counterparts living within 60 minutes of Belfast. Rural school leavers were more likely than urban school leavers to enter higher education, but again there is variation within rural Northern Ireland, with 43% of those living more than 60 minutes from Belfast going to higher education compared to 47% living within the 60-minute drive time. This chart shows the percentage of the working age population in employment by sex and urban-rural breakdowns. Overall employment levels for both men and women are higher in rural than in the urban population, with the employment level highest among those males living in rural areas within the 1 hour's commute of Belfast at 81%. However, for females, we can see that 69% of those living more than 60 minutes from Belfast were in employment, which is the same as their urban counterparts, and it's 7 percentage points lower than rural women living 60 minutes or less from Belfast. From this chart, we can see that in 2024, the median annual salaries for workers in rural areas were £2,863 less than those in urban areas, and that decreases to £4,542 less for those living more than an hour from Belfast. And yet, despite what was seen in those last slides, this chart shows that in terms of job satisfaction, workers in rural areas are more likely to report high levels of satisfaction with their job, and the greatest job satisfaction is seen in those living more than an hour from Belfast. However, it's important to note that this information is based on your home address rather than your work address, and workers may commute long distances for more highly skilled and better paid employment than is available locally, so therefore this data may reflect the quality of the jobs in the areas where they work rather than the areas where they live. More than half of Northern Ireland businesses are located in rural areas, yet rural businesses account for just 21% of employees and just over a quarter of all business turnover. When we look at rural areas more than 1 hour from Belfast, while 23% of all businesses are located here, the largest proportion of these are small businesses with less than 10 employees, and almost 40% are in the agriculture, forestry and fishing broad industry group, accounting for just 8% of Northern Ireland's total turnover. In terms of access to services then, commentary on access to services in the 2024 Key Rural Issues Report is based on the 2017 Multiple Deprivation Measure, and it is well acknowledged that an update of the INI MDM is needed. NISRA are currently in the process of forming a new team to undertake this. A number of options are being explored, ranging from a revision of the existing MDM 2017 based on updated data sources to an in-depth methodological review of the measures, and NISRA would welcome engagement with users to seek feedback on the design of future outputs. For those living in remote or rural areas, access to private transport can be a marker of disadvantage. The 2017 MDM indicates that for those living more than 1 hour from Belfast, access to key services by public transport is poor. 8% of small rural areas more than 1 hour from Belfast did not have public transport access to GP premises in 2017, compared to 2% in small rural areas within 1 hour of Belfast. For those living in rural areas, car journey times to key services were substantially higher than for those living in towns and cities. The disparity was more pronounced in rural areas further from Belfast, and the greatest disparity can be seen in travel times to hospitals with an A&E facility. For rural areas more than 1 hour from Belfast, travel time to an A&E department took 26 minutes on average, which is twice as long as the 13 minutes that it takes in urban areas. Emergent response times are also longer for rural areas, with an average response time for an ambulance in rural areas exceeding 30 minutes for the first time in 2023. Despite the issues with access to services, health inequalities monitoring data in 2020 and 2022 from the Department of Health reports that life expectancy continues to be notably higher in rural areas than urban areas, with both males and females enjoying additional years of healthy life compared to their urban counterparts. Rural dwellers are also more likely to report lower anxiety, higher happiness, and higher life satisfaction than urban dwellers. So in terms of the report and how we hope to develop it going forward, the 2025 edition of Key Rural Issues is planned for publication in February 2026. And rural statisticians in DAERA are undertaking an NISRA-wide review of available datasets to determine where additional urban-rural disaggregation can be provided and, if appropriate, included in Key Rural Issues. Ongoing engagement with data producers has led to additional urban-rural datasets being made available on the NISRA data portal, including poverty and income inequality data, school leavers data, and health inequality data, with dissemination plans being developed for further datasets. Due to representativeness or disclosure control issues, most data in Key Rural Issues is survey data and often cannot be reported at small geographies. Usually the smallest geography available from survey data is local government district, and this can mask diversity of rural issues and/or rural areas that finer granularity would uncover. So DAERA statisticians are currently exploring data from the Census 2021, available at Super Data Zone and Data Zone disaggregation, to gain a better understanding of the potential uses for this data to support rural policy and programme development, and to enhance accessibility for all our users, particularly in terms of interactive area selection and comparison of demographic, social and economic data at smaller geographies. And whilst DAERA statisticians have a particular rural focus in this work, our NISRA colleagues are also advancing work on applications to make it easier for users to access, visualise and use data currently hosted on the NISRA data portal, which can be quite technical in nature. As such, NISRA have recently developed the NISRA Data Explorer to improve access and usability of data at greater spatial disaggregation. And I've included a wee link there to some of the data that's available on the Data Explorer. So it maps out the data at Super Data Zone for travel times and anything else that we can report at that low geography. And it's a nice spatial image of the data. So I'd like to thank you again for inviting me to present the report, and I would welcome any discussion or feedback on the report itself. And if you would like any further information, I provided my contact details and those of my colleague Sally Pattison, as well as links to both the DAERA and NISRA web pages.
Okay, thank you very much, Daniel. That's very informative. I'm just Googling there. I know you picked out the Marble Arch Caves, but the folk park as well outside Omagh, I think, is in that list of top 10 as well. So we're doing well as far as that goes. We have 2 attractions in the district, one on the Omagh side and one on the Fermanagh side. Any questions coming in from that? Yeah, go ahead, Josephine.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Danielle, for your presentation. It's really fascinating, and I hope that you can share that presentation so that we'll have an opportunity to digest those figures.
Yes, no.
I suppose it's of concern that rural dwellers have poor access to services. And I'm just wondering, and you may not be able to answer this question, but as a subcommittee, we've always been concerned about inequity between urban and rural areas and so on. So can you say to what extent these reports from DAERA feed into decision making at ministerial level in terms of resource allocation to urban and rural areas? Because it's our impression that in our district council area, Fermanagh and Omagh, despite its large geographical size and rural nature, that we invariably get a lower, because of our lower population, we get a lower percentage, and it's really not pro rata of the resources that are available. So have you any information regarding to what extent these statistics are factored into resource allocation at ministerial level? Thank you.
Thank you. I suppose as a statistician, really, my remit is to produce the statistics, make sure they're robust and transparent, and that they meet the user needs, and that those user needs include policy colleagues in DAERA. But as far as how far it factors into allocations and things like that, I wouldn't have coverage of that. But I certainly know they're valued within the department and they are well used.
Okay, well, thanks, Danielle. I realise that you might not have been able to answer that question, but we might be able to use your statistics to draft questions to our ministerial colleagues in terms of resource allocation. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josephine. Anthony, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. No, it's more just a comment as well, not a question. I'd like to thank you for that very informative presentation there. And I think Josephine actually that maybe share to the rest of the group, because I know Seamus isn't on here today, and I know he'd be interested in that. Would have had a few comments on it, so we could share it to the rest of the group. And I know we haven't good services around here, or public transport, or getting to the hospital. But at least we're all happy here anyway, which is one good thing. And thanks for that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's interesting because it backs up a lot of what you've told us, Danielle. It backs up what we know. I know it's very hard to break it down even finer. I'm going to go over, Alan, have you anything to comment on? Because Alan's our statistician and he keeps us right normally, but now we've got you as well. I mean, it's kind of what I feel anyway. You're just reinforcing what Alan's been telling us all along.
Absolutely, Chair, and I'll just put on record that I'm not a statistician. I wouldn't want to cause offence to Danielle and her NISRA colleagues. I'm an analyst, more by background than a statistician. So when you get into the nitty-gritty of these things, there is a difference. But no, I support that, Chair. Definitely, it reconfirmed a lot of my thoughts on the publication, which is always reassuring, as somebody who uses the publication a lot and talks about it a lot, to actually make sure what I'm saying is consistent with what the statisticians who draft the report are saying. That's always reassuring and means I can act with confidence when using that report and using the data within it to challenge ministerial decisions, as Councillor Deehan outlined there. I think it's the point made about the multiple deprivation measure and the options that are on the table are very interesting, certainly, Danielle, and if you can feed back to colleagues. I mean, our position, the Council's position, I don't mean to speak for elected members, but the Council's position has always been that we're not fans of the current multiple deprivation methodology, and I think we would welcome any opportunity to go for the sort of the full review as opposed to the simple update, but that's just from my perception of our conversations. I think you made a few interesting points here that maybe I hadn't picked up on in the past about ambulance and A&E times, and the fact that maybe those have been creeping in the wrong direction over recent years. I think that's certainly a part of the publication that we can keep an eye on. I don't know.
It's
previously. Yeah, go ahead, Danielle.
Bear in mind that it's survey data, so it will shift slightly over. from one survey to the next. So changes aren't always indicative of a trend, but
Okay.
certainly it does seem to be that over the space of a number of years now, those things have been creeping up.
No problem. Yeah, no, certainly will. I always promote that concept as well. You know, not to overdwell on year changes. But no, you're right. We'll keep an eye on that. You know, it's something that we might need to just to think about. And then on the point, obviously, yes, the Marble Arch Caves is on that list. I think, and you're right, Ulster American Folk Park is on the list, and previously Blake Pottery would have been on older editions of that list as well. And in more recent times, I'm not sure if it's in the Key Rural Issues publication, but it is part of that same sort of visitor attraction survey that NISR do. There's a sort of a sub-classification for sort of parks, parks as opposed to all-round attractions. And I know Gortin Glens does feature in the top 10 most popular parks in Northern Ireland as well. So that's always good to know.
Yeah, it's good that those other reports are there with that more granular information as well. Like in Key Rural Issues, we're trying to pull out kind of the headline facts from all of those many sources. But yeah, there's certainly more information and within the actual reports themselves that we draw on.
And just to confirm, the Marble Arch Caves is in the top 10 visitor attractions. Is that the classification used?
It's paid visitor attractions, yeah.
Paid visitor attraction.
Yeah.
That is even that in itself is a good thing, because I know whenever I first joined the council and I analysed that publication, we had nowhere even located in the Fermanagh district was in the top 10 of anything, paid, unpaid, or parks at that time. So it's brilliant that we're in that list. That's a step in the right direction.
Thank you, Alan. Nobody else is indicating. Sinead, Sinead, would you like to say anything, or will we?
Nothing other than Danielle to thank you for joining us and for providing information. And if you're happy to share the presentation on that, would be really helpful. The only other thing I wanted just to maybe ask you around was just the update to and Alan has already mentioned the multiple deprivation measure. And you were talking about a new team being set up, and it was just to maybe understand a little bit about the timescale for that. And you'd said that you obviously were open and welcome in any input, but would that be by are councils likely to be asked to comment on that, or are views likely to be sought formally on that, or would we need to say we want to be involved and get a view into that process?
I can certainly take that back to my colleagues in NISR who are taking that forward. But I understand from the last time there was lots of engagement right across with stakeholders within government and councils, and also other interested stakeholders. So what I understand from what I've been told by the team taking it forward, that they will be undertaking quite a good bit of stakeholder engagement. So I imagine they will reach out, but I will certainly mention to them there's definitely interest from this group, and point them your way.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Danielle. That's been brilliant. Will you come back next year and give us another update?
Yeah, we'll get it out in February if all goes well. Yeah, hopefully things are going in the right direction.
That's brilliant.
All right.
It's always it's very informative. So thank you very much for taking your time to come in and speak to us this evening. So safe home. If you're not at home, safe home.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you.
So now I can go back to my agenda. So item agenda 6 then.
Yes, Chair. So if you're content, Chair, I'll start off just the initial part of the paper, and then I'll hand over to Alan. So purpose of the paper really is to, I suppose, provide an update in relation to our strategic work plan, which is obviously an ongoing, extensive area of work. So as we know, members, this subcommittee provides really a forum to consider matters outside the scope of the Council's existing statutory committees, and obviously have that particular focus on rurality, which is obviously evidenced just from the previous presentation. So Rural Fair Subcommittee Strategic Work Plan was agreed back in January 2024, and it set out 5 work streams to support really the work of the subcommittee. And the report then provides an update now today on all of the strategic work streams, and just to note that the work plan is due to be reviewed in January 2026. So that'll be a forthcoming piece of work. So just looking, members, at the key issues then, and just that initial part of the paper in terms of central government policy and funding support. So this is a piece of work that we have been, I suppose, very actively engaged on recently, with various different engagements with ministers and then senior departmental officers as well. So Rural Affairs Subcommittee, we've now met with the Minister for Finance, we've met with the Minister for Infrastructure, and then we've also met with senior officials from DAERA, and then senior officials also from the Department of Health. I think it's probably fair to say, members, that the response to the research paper that had been collated for those various meetings has been broadly positive, and full written responses were committed to by the Minister for Infrastructure and also from the Department of Health, and the response from the Minister of Infrastructure is also attached at the correspondence section of the agenda, and a written response from DAERA officers is also attached at the correspondence section of the agenda, and written responses to specific questions then are expected from the Minister for Finance. So, Chair, I'm not sure if this would be an appropriate point maybe to actually focus on those two pieces of correspondence at this point, or I'm happy to leave them to later, but happy to be directed, Chair, if we could maybe just look at them at this point, if you were content.
Sorry, I was rescuing a member of Paw Patrol who got stuck down the back of the sofa, but for my grandson, so I missed part of that, Sinead. But no, I think a whole the whole picture. So if there's replies there, I think they should be included at this stage.
Okay. So if I could just take members then to the ministerial response that was submitted into us. It was 12th of November, received it from Minister of Infrastructure, Liz Kim's MLA. So Chair and members, I'll just very briefly just go through the correspondence. So members will recall at the meeting, obviously, prior to the meeting, we'd submitted very detailed research paper, and then at the meeting we posed a series of questions around the evidence. So the Minister has gone through each of those in turn. So I suppose the first one really looks at the one around road maintenance in particular. So it looks at how that's funded, and the Minister's noted that it really includes everything from patching to grass cutting, and considers factors such as defect information, the areas of grass and the numbers of gullies. So Minister's noting there that ensures the department addresses the actual need identified. Minister goes on then to talk about structural maintenance funding, and also how then they deliver the programme of works under the Road Recovery Fund and the spend in the context of that. Looking at defects across those parts of the network most impacted by the introduction of this maintenance limited service, which the Minister referred to during her meeting. I suppose just an observation from my perspective just on that, the Roads Recovery Fund and the amount of money spent there. I think it would be helpful to understand, I suppose, the portion of that has been, I suppose, spent and attributed to the district. So that's maybe something members would want us to follow up on. Looking then further on into detail of the letter in relation to funding allocations, the Minister's confirming the distribution of resources available for road maintenance are made to the 4 roads divisions based on need. And a range of weighted indicators tailored to each maintenance activity. Again, I think it would probably be helpful to understand what those weighted indicators are, and members may wish us to follow up on that. The Minister's also gone on then to explain, I suppose, around the funding of capital schemes, and specifically has mentioned the A5, and I suppose just noting that the benefits of the A5 would be wider than just the district benefits, and then has gone on to note the high importance in terms of adequate maintenance of the rural road network, and the continuing delivery of the programme of works through the Road Recovery Fund. The Minister's also gone on then to provide some detailed commentary around the All Ireland Strategic Rail Review, and obviously when we met we had a particular question around where Fermanagh, I suppose, sits at present in relation to all of that. So members will note that that following the publication in 2023 that the review consultants reconsidered the viability of rail services to Fermanagh, and the Minister has also confirmed then that there's an inbuilt review would take place every 10 years to allow Fermanagh to be considered again. The Minister goes on then to talk further about the context of that real review and the different avenues of funding in relation to that. And the Minister then goes on to talk about or provide information around investment decisions in relation to water and wastewater infrastructure. And notes that the NI Water role in terms of their statutory obligation are required to have due regard to individuals residing in rural areas when delivering those projects, and that then is exercised through the role of the price control process. Ministers also provided some information regarding the Rural Wastewater Investment Programme, and then has gone on to explain that the programme had been running since 2008 and the areas of upgrade in terms of 170 rural wastewater treatment works across Northern Ireland. Again, my observation on that would be, I think it'd be useful just to understand the extent of that within the district, and if members may wish us to seek further information on that. And then specifically we had a query around the adverse rain event in Enniskillen, and Ministers provided a commentary on that, but noting just I suppose the intensity of that particular rainfall, and really the assurance then that her department is able to respond to these adverse weather events as they come forward. So that's the correspondence from the Minister of Infrastructure, and then we also have correspondence, Chair, on the agenda from NIA, and if you're content, I can either pause at this point and take maybe some comments on the Minister's correspondence, or I can look at the NIA correspondence, which Alan's going to speak to. I think you're just on mute, Chair.
All right. If anybody wants to comment, if you want to stick your hand up, or we just keep going on. I'm not seeing anybody indicating, Sinead, so I'm happy to go on ahead. And then we'll... Sorry?
Yeah. I was just saying, happy enough to continue. I don't have any actual questions. You're doing well, Sinead.
Okay, thank you, Debbie.
So, Chair, I'm just going to hand over to Alan just to take us through the NIA correspondence then.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sinead. So, if you recall, we had a hybrid meeting in the chamber in Omagh, and then some members were at home, and we met two officers from DAERA. And there was no commitment or no need for a commitment for a full written response to a research paper, but there was a question posed by Councillor Rainey near the end of the meeting regarding blue-green algae and whether it was present in Lough Foyle, and I suppose the process of where blue-green algae enters Lough Neagh. So those DAERA officials took that away to their colleagues in NIEA, and they issued us with the written letter response that's in item 7.1 on tonight's agenda. So essentially what we asked were two questions. We're getting blue-green algae and water pollution issues outside the Lough Neagh catchment, and then secondly, blue-green algae issues within Lough Foyle. We're looking at the first question. It notes that the department's interagency blue-green algae monitoring protocol is operational for the 2024 and 2025 seasons. So the department are very actively tracking blue-green algae blooms across Northern Ireland in line with the legislation that's quoted there. It does note that specific information on water quality may be viewed, and it provides a hyperlink to the department, the DAERA website. And that includes catchments within the Fermanagh and Omagh District Council area. I had a look just this afternoon in advance of the meeting this evening, and the data is definitely there, and it's also available in Open Data NI as well. It is caveated that the data on the website on Open Data NI is raw data, and conclusions can't be drawn from the raw data without further processing. So it would be, I suppose, remiss of us to analyse that data and draw conclusions for, there's a risk that we wouldn't be doing the data processing in line with the protocols that the department would have or NIEA would have in place. But certainly the data are there for examination. It only covers the years 1990 to 2018, as far as I can see. So it doesn't necessarily include the more recent blue-green algae issues that we've seen in Lough Neagh and elsewhere. But it does actively state that they're in the process of updating those data sets all the time. So you would hope to see over the coming months that the number of years available would expand over time. We're aware that the department has published a Lough Neagh report and action plan outlining science-based actions to address water quality issues in the catchment, including blue-green algae blooms. We know that the Lough Neagh in particular is cited in the programme for government as an area of priority on that. If we move on then to the second question around Lough Foyle, it just notes that as of the 2nd of October 2025, the department has no confirmed reports of blue-green algae blooms in Lough Foyle. And then it provides a number of paragraphs, which I've tried to summarise here, so I'll give you my interpretation, noting I'm not an ecologist by any means, but there are some cyanobacteria observed in Lough Foyle and Foyle estuary, but not blue-green algae blooms at the level of those experienced in Lough Neagh. So essentially there are no blue-green algae blooms, but maybe there are some of the bacteria that might cause blue-green algae blooms. Largely then the cite that the conditions for blue-green algae to develop or thrive include sunlight, still and slow flowing water and sufficient nutrients, but these are not experienced in Lough Foyle, perhaps due to the higher river flow, the tidal current and the turbid waters. I suppose the rivers are flowing maybe faster than they are into Lough Neagh. There's a tidal current because it's an estuary, and the waters aren't particularly clear in nature, so the sunlight's not getting through in Lough Foyle. It also then notes that there is a legacy of nutrients within the sediments on the bed of Lough Neagh. And that sounds like a sort of a unique characteristic to Lough Neagh that might not be present in Lough Foyle. And they do provide a link there on the page to a GIS viewer, so you can click on that link and you can access reported blue-green algae sightings, of which I think there were 129 live on it when I clicked on it this afternoon. And yes, some of those were around lochs in the Fermanagh area, as well as obviously Lough Neagh. So that data remains live and is available to members and members of the general public as well, to keep an eye on that. But that's the response in a nutshell, Chair. Happy to open any discussion through yourself.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Josephine, you're in there first.
Yeah, thank you, John, and thank you to Sinead and Alan for your reports. I just really wanted to make a comment on the response from Minister Kimmins. And I mean, it was good to have such a detailed response, but I would propose, Chair, that we seek for further clarification from the Minister regarding the rural wastewater investment, because she does refer to investment since 2008, which is like 17 years and 47 million. And, it doesn't seem like an awful lot. And just recalling our housing conference last Friday, I think it was acknowledged that in terms of housing provision, that one of the bottlenecks is the lack of wastewater infrastructure. So I would propose that we write back and seek further clarity on that investment and what are the plans for investment into the future in terms of rural wastewater improvement. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Josephine. And again, I mean, that was the one thing that I took away from that conference on Friday as well, was the amount of different organisations, and each were blaming Northern Ireland Water and the lack of infrastructure. Anthony, you're next.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And yeah, I'll second Josephine's proposal there. I was at the conference too, and every organisation mentioned them. And funny, there's no representatives at all from NI Water, and that's probably the reason what went there. But I'd like to thank Minister Kimmins for getting back to us as well, and thank Alan for that letters about the algae as well. So that's thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Bernard, there, you're next.
I agree with Josephine, and I would like to second her proposal, and definitely some of the questions at the housing conference. But is there possibly, could we ask as well that is there new technologies regarding sewage, coming along down the line? Is there anybody looking into that as well, just for the future, because it's going to block up everything. Pardon if there's not new technologies coming down the line, to offset this, it's not going to change. But just wondering, is the infrastructure looking into new technologies? Thanks, John. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Bernard. Yeah, I would totally agree with you. I mean, we've got to look at the way other countries are dealing with this problem as well. I mean, the Scandinavians have some unique ways of dealing with things, and I suppose maybe that's what we need to be looking at as well, especially for rural areas rather than the bigger cities. Go ahead, Debbie.
Well, just on that, Chair, could we look, or would Alan be able to? Not that I want to give him, double his workload or anything, but can we as a council look at how they're doing it in, for example, Scandinavian countries? Where maybe they, or in places where there is, more sufficient rural housing and the waterworks and all of that infrastructure isn't preventing them from keeping people in rural areas and keeping small villages and hamlets and things alive. So I mean, maybe we could look at some of them examples ourselves.
I'm not sure. What do you think about that, Alan?
I think if we took perhaps a more limited approach to maybe trying to identify initially countries where there isn't a constraint, where wastewater infrastructure isn't providing a constraint, that might be a more straightforward task than getting into the complexities of why. We're fearful there that you might get into a very technical minefield in terms of infrastructure developments and technically how all that's managed. But I think we could take an initial look, perhaps working with planning colleagues.
Would you be happy enough with that, Debbie?
Yeah. No, I'm happy with that. Yeah, because once we know, and we can ask questions from that. Then once we've got that information.
Yeah, that's very good. Okay. I'm not seeing anybody else indicating.
Chair, can I maybe just come in then to check that Councillor Deehan's content to add that additional query from Councillor McGrath into her proposal that was seconded by Councillor Freely in terms of the additional piece around new technology, and we would add that into the letter then back to the Minister?
Yes, Chair. Happy to incorporate that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, no bother.
Okay, that's
Perfect.
it. Anthony's there as well, Sinead. So
Perfect. And could I also just then, I suppose just for completeness, because we've moved the two letters up the agenda, could I just get proposers to note and second those as well then?
okay.
Yeah,
Bernard's- Anthony's proposing and Bernard seconding.
Yeah.
Seamus, I haven't let you in yet. Your hands just appeared there on my screen. I'm sorry if I've missed you, but come on ahead in.
No, thank you, and apologies. I'm having my broadband and phone has been down for the last 2 days, so I'm basically I have a bit of broadband that's come back online now, so I'm only getting joining there away about 10 minutes ago. So I'll not go through what I've missed, but just on that letter from the Infrastructure Minister and the 47 million from 2008, can we ask how that compares with what the total expenditure was from 2008, and yet a percentage of what has been spent, a percentage of what 47 million is on infrastructure and water system and sewage in this area? So 47 million doesn't seem a lot, but it's a lot of money. But I suspect if you took it into percentage ways, it's probably showing that we are far below the expenditure of other areas. So could we ask that?
Yeah, if nobody else is coming in, I'm happy to second that, Seamus, myself. I mean, it is. I was kind of thinking that myself, 47 million, and then we go back to 2008. You're looking 17 years. You're only over 2 million. It's in the grand scheme of things, maybe it isn't that much money at all.
And Chair, what would be the estimated amount that we would need? Because 47 million, if you was writing a report and you put, we've had 47 million, people go, wow, that's a lot of money. I know when you break it down to us, it doesn't sound like a lot of money, but what is the projected costings? What do we, it's no good giving us 47 million if we need 247 million, and there must be some idea of what would really be needed to provide a proper service and to do the proper works that's needed, etc., etc. I mean, you know, is there any way of finding that out? I mean, I don't know whether the department would look at that or not, but you know, if you,
Yeah, Debbie, I'm going to stop you there.
yeah,
I mean, I've heard, and maybe some of the officers or some of the other countries could back me up on this. I've heard that in order to fix it across all of Northern Ireland, they're talking about, is it 1.2 billion to fix our water infrastructure? Is that a figure anybody else has heard, or is it, or have I just plucked that out of the air? But I seem to think it's like a colossal figure.
Joan, if you let me in there, I don't.
Yeah.
I think it's far more than that, because the PC21 was a £2 billion programme, which covered from 2021 to 2027, unless I'm wrong on that, and it was 2 billion.
I think you're right, Seamus.
PC28 could be another 2 billion programme, and let's remember why we need to know what 47 million equates to in percentage ways. We got this disputed figures, but no matter which way you go, 0.6% or 2.5%, still is something like 60% less than other areas got. So, you know, we're really on I think that's the type of figures we're talking about that's being spent. Now, if Debbie's saying what needs to be spent to fix it, I think that would you'd quadruple that over a period of time.
Yeah. Bernard, go on ahead.
No, just going back to the meeting with the minister. Like I thought, you know, when we asked the questions about how much, you know, it would be, you know, for Mananoma, it wouldn't be the whole of Northern Ireland. You know, it was like all the questions that we kind of asked that day were all to do with our own area. You know, we wanted. So maybe the fact is that it was a small number, and it was probably better to give a Northern Ireland view on it. You know, but everything was kind of regarding from Mana and Oma area, you know.
Yeah, thank you, Bernard. Sinead, there, I interrupted you there. You're just about.
No, you're okay, Chair. Thank you. I was going to just check to clarify then was that in our letter to the Minister that we're proposing, are we adding in then an additional question to it? That was in terms of the amount that would need to be spent that Councillor Coyle has proposed. A broader question. We're adding that to our letter as well.
Else for the whole of Northern Ireland, but it mightn't be possible for just what our district needs, but for what they think it needs to repair the whole of the infrastructure, either for Mananoma or else all of Northern Ireland. Is everybody happy with that? I'm seeing people nodding and.
For us to kind of get a good local figure anyway, some kind of local figure anyway. Thanks.
Come on ahead, then, Seamus.
Yeah, you see, it's a bit like that last letter that was sent from I think it was the department or NIEA in relation to blue-green algae and everything. NIEA and Northern Ireland Water and the Department of Agriculture and anybody that's doing these, they're working off desktop models in the vast majority of the cases. And again, this here, what Department of Infrastructure is going by is desktop modeling too, because I think I've said this before, my own local village had 17% capacity, and then 2 years later it had 2% capacity, even though there was no building had happened. And it was when we delved into it, they had they come out and actually did on the ground sampling for the sewage system, and it turned out that the 17% was actually correct. So they were putting in that if they hadn't been challenged, that Bruceburn had no capacity for new houses, where it actually turned out they had, because they were desktop modelling. So I think they need to be challenged on that every village and town should be challenged and done proper on the ground studies instead of this desktop stuff, because Rupert was going to be blocked from building any new housing. That's what the planning committee would have been told, that there was no capacity, except we challenged them on it. So I think the whole premise of what the department are going by these desktop modelling, needs to be challenged, and challenged very vigorously. It's it's disgraceful, and I think we need to be asking that question. What are they going by this? Is this actual on the ground stats they're using, or is it desktop modelling?
Yeah.
I think that should be asked, maybe.
Sorry. Sinead, Seamus's ideas there, can we work that into the letter as well to see if they can do actual physical surveys rather than desktop surveys to give us a realistic? I think part of this problem is that they don't have the staff. They have subcontractors coming in and doing a lot of the work. And I believe they've lost a lot of the knowledge that they would have had from staff who knew how systems worked from either through age or just moving on. People understood how systems worked, and I can remember one man used to say, "Oh, this is the greatest. Mine's great," and he could, whether it was a trick or not, but I can remember as a child, and he would drink a cup of water out of it, and I wouldn't have done it, but he said it's the greatest water ever, and he could drink it, but whether it was a trick and it had hid somewhere, but I can remember him drinking water out of the treatment plant, and well, it made my stomach turn as a child, but he said it was spotless, the water. So, I mean, there's nobody like that anymore.
So, Chair, the only thing I was just going to comment on was that the letter that we are proposing and have been have the different aspects to is to the Ministry of Infrastructure, so we can add it on to that letter. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Oh, is that concluded then?
So, Chair, that's that section of that paper concluded. We've a couple of more sections then. So that's the piece around central government policy funding and the correspondence that relates to that. We've dealt with that, but there's a couple of more sections of the paper that, if you're content, I'm going to invite Alan in just to complete those out.
Yeah. Okay.
No problem. Thank you, Chair.
Just let you go right to the end, Alan, and then seek questions. Would that be the easiest way to do it?
If you're content with that approach, Chair, I am happy to do that.
Yeah,
okay.
I think so. If you're happy with that, Alan, thank you.
No problem. So the research agenda starting at paragraph 2.5. Not that I should be coming across very reminiscent tonight, but back in the early days in the Rural Affairs Subcommittee in 2021, there was a frustration that many of the issues that we are facing and that we know exist are supported only by anecdotal evidence. And the desire was that the Rural Affairs Subcommittee would seek to change that by bringing robust evidence to the table. And we are doing that. And as part of that, I'd reported back in February that the Department for the Economy had funded or were funding a collaborative PhD studentship with Queen's University Belfast entitled Migration, Education and Development in the West of Northern Ireland, and that related to the student mobility project outlined in the Rural Affairs Strategic Work Plan. So I think back in February, the PhD studentship was actually live on the website, actively being advertised. Since then, a PhD student has been appointed and commenced work on the project in October 2025. So they're probably 6 to 8 weeks into the project at this stage. And in terms of a PhD, that's very small. I have been up in Belfast. I've met the student. I've met the supervisors, the academic supervisors, and the officers from the Department for the Economy who are funding it. So the initial stage is that they'll be doing the academic work and academic literature review, looking at other geographical areas that have experienced similar issues, how academics have sought to quantify those issues and identify the factors that influence it. Following that, that process should identify data that the PhD student will need to access in order to replicate or do their own analysis for the West of NI. And to access that data, a formal application will need to be made to NISRA to get the data from the Northern Ireland longitudinal study. And through the discussions that day when I was up in Belfast, it was felt by colleagues at Queen's that a letter of support for the project from Annonoma District Council would aid that application for data from the Northern Ireland longitudinal study. And that's one of the recommendations in the paper this evening, Chair. Suppose as things go forward, I will be continuing to be in engagement with DFE, Queen's and the PhD student at regular intervals, and I'll bring back updates as appropriate. I suppose I do want to caveat that whilst from Annonoma District Council is noted as an organisation of interest or what you might call a soft partner at the table, I suppose we're not the academic body and we're not the funder. So my ability or the Council's ability to formally influence the research is limited. But nevertheless, I think it's a great opportunity and a great development. And something I'm very interested in, and I'm glad that we're at the table, even if it is in an informal manner. So that's that work stream, Chair. I'll move on then to resource allocation, starting at paragraph 2.9. And really the resource allocation work stream is what has brought us all the evidence that we've used and we've discussed under the central government policy and funding support. So all the letters and the meetings with the ministers and departmental officials, that evidence has largely come from the resource allocation aspect of the Rural Affairs Subcommittee, with support from colleagues in corporate and strategic services who write public consultation responses. But it was felt that our focus was very much on roads and water infrastructure initially, whilst we continue to build those evidence bases, including the letters that were proposed earlier this evening. I think we do want to broaden our approach now and look at other areas where we think there's an inequitable share of resourcing from central government and arm's length bodies. So at a previous meeting, members had indicated that Sport NI funding was of concern, and that maybe the funding they were allocating wasn't adequately or wasn't equitably coming to the Annonoma District. So council officers have commenced research in this, looking at what funding streams Sport NI have opened in recent years and what organisations or who was eligible for that funding. And that's include Everybody Active 2020, the NI Football Fund and the Sports Sustainability Fund, and there probably are others as well. I should note that the council as a body did receive funding directly from Sport NI through Everybody Active, whilst I think those other two funds are more for clubs. So there's sort of an indirectness about it. So we're working to identify that, who was eligible, what are the right questions to ask, what data would we need in order to calculate if we think we've got a fair slice of the pie. And, hopefully an update will be provided to a future Rural Affairs Subcommittee meeting on that. I do want to acknowledge the insights provided by colleagues in our community services service area who have a detailed understanding of Sport NI funding streams, what was opened, when, who was eligible, and provided myself and the team guidance on this, and certainly saved us hours of online trawling, but can be caught in a half-hour meeting, If we move on then, Chair, then to rural vibrancy and paragraph 2.10. Really, rural vibrancy is, we've discussed a lot of the challenges this evening so far, but there are many positive factors that make rural areas a good place to live. And this work stream allowed us to explore that, largely through contributing to regional strategies and documents in a positive manner. And really over the last 6 months to a year, a lot of that has naturally arisen through DAERA's development of a new rural policy. And I acknowledge that the Council as Director of Corporate Services and Governance is formally involved in that process and representing SOLAS. And this has provided, while she's formally involved, it has provided officers with an opportunity informally to engage with DAERA and provide input. And there are two examples in the last 6 months, at least two examples in the last 6 months, was when I delivered a presentation to the Understanding Rural Communities Working Group around that rural policy in June 2025, outlining largely the good work of the Rural Affairs Subcommittee and the evidence that we had found and the challenges that we felt needed to be overcome in the new DAERA's new rural policy. And then again, I've met actually only last week with the Agri-Food and Biosciences Institute, which is AFBI, and we met to discuss some research around rural issues, and we're meeting again in a couple of weeks to talk more about the evidence and the data around that. So that's ongoing. If I move on then, Chair, if you're content, on to digital connectivity. and paragraph 2.11. Project Gigabit. So Project Stratum is now completed in terms of broadband provision. It closed, I think, in June. Project Gigabit is the next one in line, and it's in the procurement stage. And whilst the paper says no further details are possible, since the paper was issued, I do have a further verbal update, having contacted DFE officials. So the procurement process is progressing well, and an appointment is expected by the end of the year. And certainly the DFE officials have suggested they'd be open to engagement with the council in due course. So if members are minded, we might want to consider inviting DFE officials to a future meeting of the Rural Affairs Subcommittee to get an update on Project Gigabit. Then the other update there is just around the Tri-Nations Consortium project that I provided an update on in September 2025, that the council and colleagues in IT were part of a very large consortium applying for funding under the Department for Science and Innovation and Technology, Westminster Department's Regulators Pioneer Fund, for a project, but unfortunately that application was unsuccessful. So now through the Northern Ireland Lead Council, Antrim Newton Abbey, are working to consider what other avenues are available, because we thought we had a reasonably viable project there, and see if there's any other funding pots that might be able to support that. So any updates on that will be brought through Rural Affairs in due course. And I suppose in terms of the ad hoc then, Chair, on paragraph 2.14, I mean, it's an oddly titled work stream, but I thought it was important to put it in there in the work plan, because I know we can be proactive, but there will always be opportunities to be reactive, and usually those have quite a tight turnaround time. So in the past 6 months, the team have contributed to the DFC Shaping Sustainable Places public consultation and the DFI Transport Strategy 2034 public consultation. And those responses were approved by the Council's R&C committee. And when myself or the team contribute to consultation responses in this manner, we draw on the good work of the Rural Affairs Subcommittee, and we do it, if you like the term, with the Rural Affairs Subcommittee hat on. And that's what we bring to those consultation responses. And I think colleagues are always very appreciative of the level of detail and information that we can provide. So looking ahead now, Chair, as Sinead alluded to at the outset of this paper, the Rural Affairs Strategic Work Plan that was agreed in January 2024 was a 2-year work plan, and we'll need to give it a refresh in February, in our next meeting in February. I'd certainly welcome the opportunity to gauge members' views on what might be useful to consider in that strategic work plan. If you want to maybe stop at this point, Chair, that is the end of the paper. I suppose in addition to the discussion, just the recommendations just are initially that we note the strategic work plan update, and that we approve a letter being issued to NISRA in support of the Social Mobility PhD project. So happy to take questions or contribute to discussion through yourself, Councillor McCloughery.
Yeah. Okay, Seamus, where you go?
Thanks for that, Alan. Very informative as usual. I suppose on what we have been doing, just to add on to a bit, I don't know whether Alan was listening to the special council meeting that we had with the housing executive last Monday night, and there was some very odd, not maybe odd, but what way would I put it? When the figures was done out of what they were comparing from Ann and Omagh, they weren't putting the percentages in, they were just giving the figures. I believe in nearly every thing that they were showing us about from Ann and Omagh, we were falling short by up to 66%. For instance, we had less than 50% the NI average of actual housing executive stock. New build, we were something like 66% less new builds by housing executive and you know, the other ones, the Lexi Apex that builds rural housing and them type of things. We were 66% less than them, and in maintenance we were something like I think it was 33%. We were less than NI average on them. So it might be not a bad thing for the Rural Affairs Subcommittee maybe to take a look at the figures that Housing Executive provided us last Monday night, and actually do the statistics on it, because I just done it very roughly in my head, but there was some quite shocking figures that came up on it. And I suppose the other one there around connectivity and broadband and everything, there was a piece in Belfast Live in the last couple of days. I don't know whether any has seen it or not, but they were ranking each county, so a coverage readiness percentage. So Antrim was first, Down was second, Armagh was third, Tyrone was fourth, Derry was fifth. Now, these percentages that they showed, Antrim had 65.5% coverage. Now, I'm not just exactly sure on these stats, the meanings of them, but then Down at 54%, Armagh 31%, Tyrone 23%, Derry 14.3%, and Fermanagh was down at 11.3%. So again, we were at the bottom of the pile on that piece that Belfast compared to 65.5% in Antrim, down to 11% in Fermanagh, actually in Fermanagh, not Fermanagh Noma, that had done by the counties. And basically the headline of it was NI county with the best mobile coverage signal 15 years on, and the one still to make progress. So a bit, the looks of it, it's phone's signal that they're on a bit here. So Fermanagh's down on 11.5% compared to 65.5%. So it might be worth, if you had, and I know would need 2 or 3 Allens to be able to look at all of these things, but maybe if he could take a look at that Belfast Live report and just see what he thinks of it, that we can make of that. But there is a number of things that keeps popping up that just shows how badly treated we are by everyone. And I don't actually think it's a deliberate act. I think it's just that out of sight, out of mind, and maybe we don't put up enough of a racket about on their investment we get. So I suppose that was a bit of a rant, but anyway, to go on to the practical thing, I can propose that Alan was saying about the university studies and that in Israel, that I'm happy enough to propose. But if them other things could be also looked into, I would propose that as well.
Okay, thank you, Seamus. Bernard?
Thank you, Chair. And no, I'd be happy to second everything there that was mentioned, and just following on from Seamus, Danielle mentioned in her report about I think it was 58% of businesses in our area are rural, or some figure like that, But I'm just thinking, I was the launch of the DS3 project recently, and our council's involved with ICBAN. I'm just thinking, our villages and towns and Fermanagh, I know we didn't buy into that scheme, but I'm just thinking of businesses that are could do with a bit of help with investment with digital supports and stuff like that, digital spaces in our own area. I'm just thinking, is that something that we should be doing as well, or is there any figures or data that would improve our connectivity in that? It's just something maybe that we could look at as well. Thank you.
There's nobody else there, Alan? If you've any come back there?
No, not at all. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much to Councillor Green and Councillor McGrath for those comments. No, that's very useful, and certainly will reflect that in the strategic work plan going forward and do a bit of initial digging on that.
Okay. What are we at? Nice. 8 AOB or any other? And no, well, I didn't know I was chairing, but there's unless somebody has anything they want to raise. So it's back to you then, Sinead, the date of our next meeting.
Thank you, Chair. So the next meeting date that we have is proposed for the 19th of February 2026 at 5 p.m. and it would be also via WebEx.
Okay. That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Sinead.
Okay.
Everyone, thank you very much. As usual, this is one of the better committees. We seem to make a lot of progress here, so thank you very much. And thank you, Alan and Sinead. I know Danielle's away, but it was very informative. And I think that's something that we need to keep the pressure or keep her feeding into us as well. And as I said earlier, Alan, sorry for saying you're a statistician and not an analyst, but it does reinforce what your information is totally accurate. So thank you very much, Alan.
No, not at all. I wasn't offended at all, Chair. I'm more concerned that Danielle might have been offended,
Right.
more so than myself.
Wouldn't be like us to annoy officials from Belfast. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Good.
Thank you.
Bye.
All the best. Bye-bye.